seem to be sending Amazon stuff piece by piece. You've got a million different.
Can you switch the sound on? Right, you ready?
I just want to see. Just let me get my head around this. Yeah. Okay, go for it.
Betty, you gonna help?
No.
I think we're.
Are we live?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm just saying.
Right. One watching now, which I assume is.
That's you.
That's me. Hmm?
Here we go.
Yeah.
It still says we're unlisted, so that's no good.
Ooh, 2 people.
Yeah, that's the two of
That's
us.
us.
Right. Now we're live.
Now we're live. Hi everybody.
Is there anybody out there?
Is there anybody out there? No, I don't think there's anyone there yet. Let me move this around. It would be better if I could see it without having to turn away from the camera. That's better. I'll put that there.
You got a cable?
Sorry, look. Cable. Maybe it's going to be a quiet night. It's just going to be us.
Quiet night in.
Quiet night in. Oh, 4 people. Hello. Hi. Welcome. Hi, Andrea. Hello. Hello, Simon. Hi, Gary. So you can see I'm working on my big lino cut at the moment. And when there are a few more people on, I want to have a talk about these in a little while. Hi, Kevin. Hi, Alexandra. Hi. So you can see we're still in this kind of subdued lighting. We haven't got the lighting fixed yet. We've got some lights on order, but the ones we've got at the moment fight with the camera, so we can't switch them on. Hi, Linda from Essex. Hi. Is it stormy down in Essex? It's getting very blowy here.
Wonderful.
Hi Roseanne, hi. And hi George from Seattle. So we were going to get these ready to show you. We were going to cut the ends off these, but we didn't get around to it, so I'll have to demonstrate with them with the long handle. These are the ones that Hand Printed have got at the moment in the UK. Oh, yeah. Hi Claire, hi. Yeah, it's a bit blowy here, so hopefully it won't be too noisy tonight. Sometimes it gets a bit noisy with the trees on the roof. Yeah, hi Angie. And howdy. Ants, and it's... I'm always really worried about pronouncing people's names wrong, but hello. Ben is the one who's good with pronouncing names, so he'll be doing that later.
But he's just spilled a glass of water.
Yeah, he's just thrown a pint of water over the table, so he's just clearing that up. Hi. Anise, like Denise. Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, I always get really paranoid about pronouncing people's names on this thing, partially because I'm trying to read and talk to the camera at the same time, and partially because I'm really bad at pronunciation. So I think Ben's sorted himself out now. You move that out of the way. Hi Linda from Stockholm. Hi, hi. So I was going to talk this evening about these big tools that I've got that have come from Hand Printed in the UK. Because originally I have bought in Japan these scoops, and as you can see from their horrible dirty handles, I've used them an awful lot. And can you see how I've cut them, or rather Ben has cut them down to fit in my hand? Because originally I think these are designed that you can hit them with a hammer, but we've cut ours down to hold like that. So, this bigger version, yeah, this one that I'm working on at the moment, yeah, this is just a big old print that I'm doing right now, and I've just started on it. So it's going to have a very dark, stormy sky, pale sort of sea, and then this very sort of deep, exciting foreground. At least that is my plan. And I want to use a bit of ghost printing in this, so printing and then reprinting with it. So I'll be showing that at a later date when I get round to the printing of that. Oh, Cardman, thank you. Yes, the GoFundMe goal. Yeah, that's fantastic news. So we've got enough money now for us to do this next Lino cut series and to do a proper woodblock series. So that's really exciting. I'm really looking forward to that. Right, okay, so I've got first question from Sylvia, who says that she is using Cranfield's wiping compound for the first time and got a blotchy ink effect. Is this incorrect mixing? The wiping compound is effectively the same as tack reducer, I think. So what it's doing is it's making the ink more fluid. And probably if you use too much, it makes it harder to roll it out flat. So it may be that you just need to work the roller a lot longer. When you're rolling out, it's not that you need more ink, it's that you need to do a lot more rolling to make things even. Because it's almost like Cranfield described it as like Vaseline. It's like a kind of greasy substance that you add to the ink. So my advice would be to roll it out, and also when you're rolling it out, don't press too hard with the roller. Let the roller do the work, and you're more likely to get an even coat with that. Yeah, so it's an interesting product, this wiping compound or tack reducer. I have got some knocking about, and it does look just like petroleum jelly, like Vaseline. And I would use it myself if I was rolling out a big sheet of colour and I wanted the ink to flow a bit more smoothly, but I wouldn't use very much of it. It's quite powerful stuff, especially if you're not, if you've not used it before. I've certainly got caught out with it. So yeah, just work the roller a lot. So I was going to show you using these tools. Now, the guy in Japan who works at Michi Hamano, we had a long chat with him about which ones we wanted, and we were trying to get him to give us ones that, I don't know if you can see, but these ones are kind of curvy, they're kind of scoopy shaped. I don't know, I'm asking, does that look right, Ben? I'm showing the camera. We're trying to illustrate to people that they're scoopy. And he's given sort of fairly flat ones.
I'm not sure you can see this.
Yeah, we're not sure you can see this, but yeah, that's my scoopy one, and that's the flat one. Oh, thank you. So what I wanted to show you is what I would use these flat tools for. Good, oh good, you can see it. Good, so these flat ones, if you have smaller tools, so let's say maybe, right, those. These are power grip tools. I don't know if anybody knows these power grip tools. I think they're really good. They're a kind of middle price lino tool. They're not very expensive. But let's say you only have a sort of small U-shaped gouge for clearing. When you clear out, what tends to happen is that you end up with very ridgy clearing out, so you get lots of texture. Yeah, you can see that, that's nice. And I would use these big tools just for going in and taking out ridges, so that you don't get, if you don't like random bits of ink picking up and you want to get rid of these ridgy bits, then this tool is absolutely perfect. I'll hold it up in a second. For just cleaning out, you can see how it immediately makes a sort of lovely smooth, ooh, there we go. Gets rid of all those ridges and makes it really, really smooth. If I were using it to clear out, then I wouldn't, it doesn't really work, you can't really use it just to clear out. But if you've got, if you cut yourself some guide gouges, you can use it to run under the lino and just take out larger bits, like so. So you need to cut yourself. Mobile here. You need to cut yourself a couple of cuts first, and then you can just use it to go in and scoop out large areas like that for clearance. The other things that you can do is you can make quite an interesting mark with them. We have a picture where I did a sky doing this, and if you rock, it sort of shatters the lino. Can you pass me some newsprint, Ben? And I'll do a rubbing. You can see it's doing this quite nice kind of cutting. Let's put that closer. And that's quite a nice sort of texture. I'll do a rubbing of it in a sec.
Have you got some?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll do the bigger one as well. I quite like the randomness of it. You have to kind of get your hand in with it. It takes a bit of practice to do it. Okay, do a rubbing.
Yes, Claire, it's the 18mm one.
Yeah, so you end up with this kind of effect. Sorry, there's a bit of a delay here, so I'm never quite sure whether it's showing. Yeah, so can we see that? There we go. That's better. Yeah, and that's quite a nice way. I mean, I quite often rock tools from side to side to make texture when I'm cutting. I quite like that kind of chippy sort of feel, because I mean, most of the time I'm trying to make my lino cuts look like they're pencil or they're paint or something different. So I quite like that kind of random sort of approach to cutting. So these ones, yeah, I mean, they're not quite what we thought we were going to get, or at least I don't think they're quite what Shirley wanted to get, but I do think they're very useful. The other thing we have talked about on live stream before is when you have a lino cut and you want to keep part of it just to keep the press level. So you have a piece of lino that you have kind of left just to keep the press level. You're not going to print with it anymore, but you've left it on the raised up on the lino to hold the press. And if you have anything like that and you want to smooth off edges, again, they're very good for if you've got a hard, let's just make a hard edge. If you've got a hard edge and you want to smooth that off, they're quite good. Do
you want a close-up of this one?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Angie, very good for water effects. Yeah, really good for that sort of thing. So if you want to sort of smooth off the edge of a piece of lino, they're quite good for getting rid of hard edges. You can sort of chamfer with them like so, so that you can get rid of any hard edges that might emboss on pieces of lino you want to keep but you don't want to show anymore. So those are the long handle ones, but I really suggest that you cut the ends off so that they fit in your hands. It's a lot more comfortable and you've kind of got a lot more control.
When we show the film of cutting the ends off of these long flat chisels, we're also going to show the fact that we feel they should be polished and sharpened before you use them for anything serious.
Yes.
So as you saw with the trimming the edge off, they weren't digging in very much. So
determining the length, Yasmin asks, how do I decide how long to make them? Basically what I'm doing is working out it hitting the back of my hand and my finger resting comfortably on the blade. So if I was sort of trying to work it out, what I do is to make it sort of longer than I think I need and then chop off bits until it was about the right length. Or you could look at maybe the length of, did we do that? Just wondering. You could maybe look at the length of a tool that you're comfortable with that fits in your hand and kind of work it out from there. And of course once you've got one that's the right length, then you can cut all the others to it as well. Hi Richard. Hello. But the trick with those is to make it too long and then kind of chop bits off, because once they're too short then there's not really a lot you can do with them. So I do have another one here that's a little bit longer, and actually it is a bit too long for me. It needs cutting off a bit there. I think we left it long so that we could see the measurement on it or something, but really it could do with coming off a bit. So to go back to my one that I'm cutting at the moment, let's go back to that. So very conveniently I have to cut it upside down to get at these tiny little cliffs here. And I was going to have all white space here, and I kind of lost my nerve, so I have put some colour in, because with the dark sky I thought it would be nice to have a little bit of colour in the water. Right, yeah, Shirley is getting some more. I know she said that she was going to try and get some more. But they're good, these, because they're not hideously expensive. I don't know how much Shirley's charging for them, but is it going to be strange? Right, Roseanne wants to know if it's going to be strange working on small print. It'll be a bit odd, but the really odd thing is working with Lino with multi-block, because I never work with Lino with multi-block, and so that's quite different for me. I should be, Claire. Yeah. We'll tell Shirley. Well, I shall discuss commission with her. But the new series that we're working on, the multi-block series, is quite interesting, because multi-block, I want to kind of explore the options of multi-block. So that's why I've got 2 different pictures, and I'm going to do 2 different versions of each picture, because it seems to me that when I teach, the thing that bothers a lot of people is that kind of, how do I go from having a drawing in my sketchbook that I think would make a nice lino cut to actually making it a lino cut? That whole getting the drawing, working out how things break up into the different blocks. So my brother-in-law, £29.50, right. Yeah, my brother-in-law Simon, who may or may not be watching at the moment, has spent a hideous time with Photoshop making all different colour separation diagrams so that I can show everyone how to kind of break the 2 drawings up into separate blocks, so he's not speaking to me much at the moment. Yeah, Priscilla, yeah, it is a big struggle, and the problem with the reduction print course, that the Lino with Laura, the first one, is that it's good, but it evolves slowly, and so it's kind of an ongoing thing, and it relies people. Yeah, Simon, still here. Still. Yeah, it relies on people kind of following my thought processes through. Whereas if I do multi-block, then I can actually have films at the beginning saying, look, you know, here's my sketch. Here it is as a tracing, here are the separate blocks that are going to make up the picture, and this is how they're going to fit together. And that really applies to reduction print as well. It's just that you can see it all laid out for you in a multi-block, whereas with reduction it's kind of a developing thing. So that's something that I'm going to try and show. And it's really difficult. I mean, I was trying to explain to Simon the different elements for each print, and we found it really hard to find a common language to describe that. So I've got to work out how to say that in a film that everybody understands. Let's get my tools out again. Are there any other tricks that I use to get texture? Oh, apart from wobbling about. Yes, I do with the ink quite a lot, because you can cut texture, and there are some fantastic examples of people who cut texture. I'm just trying to think who's very good. Ian Phillips is very good. Brian Angus, who I mentioned already, he does beautiful texture. I make my marks and cut around them, but I also make texture with the inking. So sometimes I wipe away ink and let the ink from underneath show. Sometimes I use little rollers and I will drop in bits of colour. and sometimes I use rollers where I don't roll out the ink evenly, and I'll just smack the ink down and make marks like that. As far as cutting goes, the other thing you can do is you can treat the lino. I had an email, a really interesting email from a guy who uses oven cleaner to burn the lino, which was sounds quite drastic. Thank you. Yeah. It wouldn't taste very nice. No, don't eat the drawing, because it's all Indian ink and all sorts of horrible things like that. But I like the thing about drawing with a dip pen. So I have a whole range of nibs, and I draw with a dip pen, is that the Indian ink doesn't budge. This has already been cleaned a couple of times with white spirit, and you can see it's had no impact on that Indian ink at all. And also you get these lovely lines. I am a big fan of Leonard Baskin, who is, well, I think he's dead now, but he was an American sculptor and printmaker, and he did the most amazing etchings and woodcuts and things. And he also did lots of mad sculptures. But he was very good with this line.
Dead.
Yeah, he's dead apparently. But he's a really amazing. Do look up Leonard Baskin, because I think he's really amazing. He did a lot of pictures of dead birds for some reason, but don't let that put you off, because his work is very, very good. And so he, I find him quite inspirational. So that all this line work. Was multi-block the way I started cutting? No, I started with reduction printing, and it was really stupid. I was in the print room at university, and because I was the only one doing printmaking, there was nobody about, and I think I went in at a weekend and decided I was going to do a lino cut. And prior to this, I'd only ever worked in one colour, and I thought, oh, well, if I print a colour and then cut a bit more and print another colour, maybe that would work, like reinventing the wheel. I didn't even know that much about it. So I did the first one I did, I'll have to see if I can find it. I think I might still have it, but it was really clumsy and really bright colours. It was sort of yellow, orange and black, 3-layer, and it was a picture of an engine in the Science Museum that I'd drawn. So it was a great big cast iron Victorian steam thing. So that I was terribly pleased with myself at the time. I thought I'd really cracked it, but I hadn't. The etching the lino with oven cleaner. Yeah, it sounded quite interesting. I mean, you can use caustic soda as well. I think people mix it up in wallpaper paste and paint that on. And I spoke to a lady once who tried it, and she'd mistaken 20 minutes for 20 hours. And when she went back, there was just like this bit of rag on the table, and all the lino had gone completely. Right, okay. So Gary wants to know, the Fabriano Rosa Spina, he has managed to get 220 gram and not the 285. It'll just be lighter weight, actually, Gary. It'll be absolutely fine. It's quite a nice sort of blankety paper anyway. I don't know if I've ever had any of the 220, but it shouldn't be a problem. I think you'll like it. I've got some of the other stuff. So this stuff is the 285, and it's I don't know, it's always hard to show people. I've got a bit with a watermark, and it's quite a sort of chunky, thick paper, but the 220 will be fine, and it's nice because it's sort of it almost embosses when you print with it. Something for cutting for light and shade. Let me have a think. I'm going to send Ben to have a look in my prints selection. Can you find a print in the stack that shows light and shade. A print in the mounted print section that shows light and shade. He's going to have a look in the corner where I've got my the browser prints. Yeah, there should be something on the top stack there, and if I've got a print to talk about, I will be able to talk about light and shade in a better way. Oh, thank you again. Oh, sorry, he's just knocked the camera. Okay. Right, start with this one. Okay. Right, so you can see this shade here, and hopefully lighter bits here. Hi Odette, hi. So some of this is done with cutting, so hopefully you can see on this side there's a pale layer, and then I've cut into it, and then there's a dark layer on the top. So you can see this is quite graphic. Let me hold that a bit closer to the camera so you can see that. So that bit is quite graphic and done, yeah, done with cutting here. That's it. Ben's going to show you. Yeah, that's it. So you can see the cut marks there. Lovely, thank you. Whereas this bit here, on the other side, where there's this dark bit there, this bit's done with printing. So what I did was, when I was printing the grey layer, I got rollers with different shades of grey, and I inked the paler grey down here, and then I got darker ink and I inked darker grey over there, just like I was doing a painting. So imagine I was doing a painting, so I've got my dark grey up here, paler grey down here. And then when I put these transparent layers of red over the top, the darker bits show through as darker and the paler bits don't really appear. And so that dictates the shade here for the red as well, because it shows through the red and knocks it back. So you can do it either by cutting away with using textures, or you can do it actually by putting an underlayer, like you would in a painting, of inking, and then laying down transparent colour on the top and relying on that darker underlayer to knock back the shaded bits and the paler bits to show through. So that's one way of, well, two ways of handling light and dark. Have you got any other examples? Right. So
that's a
yeah.
good example.
Yeah. So here's another example. Oh, that's that one. Okay, so here's another example, and this is done simply with having a roller where you've got darker colour at one end and lighter colour at the other, and I've just rolled across using that. Oh, Priscilla, yeah, you're good. I'm glad I'm not the only Basquiat fan out there. Right, okay. Claire wants to know if the weight of paper reduction printing by hand with a wooden spoon, is a 70-gram paper more likely to tear? This is, when you're doing reduction by hand, I would always recommend going, if you want to use a lighter weight paper, which when you're rubbing by hand is a good idea, go with a Japanese washi paper. Go with the long fibred Japanese papers, because they are so much stronger. If you think about it like Western papers, the paper is pulped, so that it's short fibres basically. So it's more likely to tear. But the Japanese papers, because they're a tangle of long fibres, they don't tear easily. So if you're rubbing with the back of a spoon or something like that, they're far they stand up to far more sort of pressure and abuse than a Western paper would do, and that's why they tend to get used for repairing books by people who do conservation and stuff, because they're fantastically strong for the weight of paper. So I would look for a Japanese washi paper to do that. Yeah, 300 gram. Yeah, that's a good solid paper. Is that you printing by hand with that? Because that's quite a workout. This print, Richard, are you asking about this one with the birches? Yeah, this is a reduction print. Yeah. To turn that into a multi-block, you would need quite a few blocks, I think. You probably need about 7 or 8 blocks, I would think, to do that. So it could be done. It's a bit complicated to explain how I would do it, but you could do it, which is not really helpful. But I wouldn't. But hopefully, if you watch this series, I'm going to do a graphic version of one of the prints that's a bit like that, which will be much more about lines and cut texture rather than sort of inking up. So I do want to try and show different ways of approaching, where sometimes it's done by cutting, sometimes it's done by printing the kind of light and shade and texture and things. Right, okay, so Paul wants to know, do I have any tips on how to work with negative and positive spaces? I seem to work with both in one print. How do you decide which cut to print? What I tend to do is, when I'm drawing, it's almost more about negative space than positive space. So if I'm designing a print, I'm actually sort of almost more interested in the spaces in between the objects than the objects themselves. But when it comes to, like, for example, something like this, and I'm deciding where I'm going to cut and where I'm not going to cut, I have white Chinograph pencils. These are... they have an odd name, which I'm going to get Ben to pronounce because he's so much better at it than me. But they're a white, sort of greasy pencil that you can draw on paper and glass and plastic and metal with. And so what I would do, if I were working out which bits to cut, then I would probably...
Aquarellabile.
Thank you. Ben speaks a bit of Italian, so I'm passing
they're
that.
water soluble.
Yeah.
It means they're water soluble.
All right, okay, so they're water soluble, but they're greasy. So let's say I've got all this sort of amazing mishmash of stuff here. I would, if I wanted to cut out and I was going to leave some in here, it's easy because I know I'm cutting all this bit out. This is all coming out. But here, hopefully you can see that I'm actually colouring in with white the bits that I want to cut. Out. So the white is good for if you're cutting out pale bits, because you can actually colour in with your white pencil and it gives you a feeling of that's the lighter area. So I have these in red, and you can actually see on here, you can see the red bit. I've just coloured those in, the stones in there in red. So I have a different colour ones for those. And also I have, if I'm really worried, then I will tear off a piece of masking tape and write "do not cut" and stick it over the bit that I don't want to cut, which sounds really stupid, but it's really, really effective. So massa paper, I don't know. I will have to get some. Let me write that down. If it's a washi, it should be okay. With Lino Cut, I never damp the paper. And when you damp the paper, that then it becomes important that the paper is really strong, it has a good wet strength. So if I'm Japanese woodblock printing, then I need to know that my paper can tolerate being damp and being manipulated a lot. With lino cut, you have a bit more flexibility because you're not damping the paper, so you're not putting it under quite so much stress. But I will look into the massa paper. So yes,
it just says it's a type of washi paper.
Yeah. So the pencil, does the pencil, the Chinograph, these white pencils wash off with the white spirit? They sort of wear off, they don't come off entirely. The red one has been through a couple of washings with white spirit already. So I would never use these to draw out the kind of basic image because they would wear off as you went through the reduction process. So I like my basic image either to be in pen and ink, which I know is not going to budge for anything, or in carbon, which is pretty good. It does fade a little bit as you carry on, but I know that carbon and ink will stay on however much, well, the ink certainly however much white spirit you throw at it. So I tend to use Chinograph and in between layers for drawing. The other nice thing about Chinograph is it won't offset onto your print, whereas I have had, if I draw with pencil, sometimes I find with oil-based ink that the pencil will lift off and show on the printed paper. Right, okay. Oh, Gary wants to know about must-haves. That's a really good question because I didn't actually go out and buy my lino cut tools. They belong to Ben's grandfather. The collection I have. Right, so this little collection here is what I used for every single lino cut I cut for all of the time I was at college and a long time when I started printmaking again. So these tools came from Ben's grandfather, and then Ben's mum used them in the 50s, 1950s, when she was at Central St Martin's School of Art. And then she very nobly gave them to me. So I didn't actually have any choice in what tools I had, but they're a useful set. I'm always a bit lost as to what size they are because they've got imperial measurements, which would actually suit you, Gary, I think, rather than centimetres. But I've got a big U shape and two smaller little U shapes and a couple of V gouges, and you can see which ones are like the favourite tools by the length of them. And that's this V tool, this wide V tool is my absolute favourite tool. But I would say the best thing to do is if you can go to, it's, at the moment you can't, but if you can try tools before you buy them, that's ideal. I don't know what it's like in the States, but I know in the UK, if you can get to the shop, you can usually try the tools. The other thing is to get cheap and cheerful tools and then find which ones you like cutting with and then buy the expensive ones. Good. Oh, thank you, Nicholas, for that advice. So Nicholas is saying that Massa and Hosho paper are both available from Intaglio, that's the London print store, in packs, and they're cheaper papers that are strong and very well natured. So that is good to know, and not too bright white. So I'm going to try and get hold of Hosho and Massa, so that we can have a look at those, because I'm going to try and use a variety of papers for this multi-block series. Christine wants to know, what would you suggest drawing out the design with if you use Caligo Safe Wash? That depends on how you clean up your calico, because if you are a white spirit girl like me, then you can draw with Indian ink and dip pen and it won't matter at all. But if what you like about calico is that you can clean it with water, you do not want to use Indian ink. If I were using calico with water, then I would be using carbon paper. I would use carbon paper and transfer with that, and then I would have to draw on, I would probably use China graph to create the lines and things as I was working. So if I wanted this effect, I would draw it on with the carbon, and then when I got to the point where I wanted to cut all these nice shaped lines, I'd get in there with a China graph and draw them. And that way you won't get into like the hideous Indian ink flooding that you would have if you tried washing it with water. Surgical spirit. Oh right, okay. Yeah, I've never masked off with parcel tape. I don't tend to use parcel tape, the plastic parcel tape, partially because we stopped using it for packing stuff. Anybody who gets a registration device from us these days gets it all in kind of brown paper and things. But I don't have any surgical spirit here, I don't think. I tend to use white spirit for everything. Right. Oh, right. So Claire is saying she's used Sharpie pens and white spirit for printing. And does it? She uses Sharpie and she uses Safe Wash inks, and she doesn't get transfer. But I understand, Claire, that you're cleaning off the ink. Right. Okay. So if I understand Claire right, she draws on her lino with a Sharpie, and then she washes off any excess Sharpie ink with white spirit before printing. And once you start printing, Claire, are you then cleaning off your inks with water, or are you cleaning them off with white spirit? Because maybe you could use Sharpie pens and get away with it and clean off with water as well. Yes. Okay, so that's a good option from Claire. So if you like the idea of having using a Sharpie pen, then, as Claire says, if you clean off the excess Sharpie with white spirit before you print, and then you can kind of just keep going and clean off with water and it will all stay put. So that is good to know. Right, okay, so Angie wants to know if I use a special sort of tracing paper to transfer the designs.
She'll have to watch the episode we're going to put out on Monday.
Indeed, we have a whole episode devoted to exciting different sorts of tracing paper. I make these films and, you know, we make these films and then I sit there and think, this is so weird. Is anybody actually interested in different sorts of tracing paper? But I'm kind of relying on you all caring about stuff like that. So yeah, I use stuff called Polydraw, and Polydraw is a polyester film. So I think I've got some knocking about in the studio, which I'll have to get Ben to look. I think it's in the shelves under where the browser prints are. But it looks exactly like ordinary tracing paper. You would never know the difference. But the reason that I like it is because it's plastic. So if it gets damp, so it doesn't change the tracing. It doesn't change. Oh, here we go. Right. Okay. So I'm sure other ones are available, but this is the one I use. So this is the plastic film. It's not cheap, I have to say, but I'll just find some. So that's what it looks like. So it looks just like tracing paper. Hopefully you can see that. Looks just like ordinary tracing paper, but it will not change shape. So if you're like me and you're inclined to spill bits of tea on it, or I found even if it's a really rainy day and the air is very humid, ordinary tracing paper, which is quite starchy, can actually change shape slightly. So if you are just going to do a drawing, take a tracing, put it on a piece of lino, take the tracing off, transfer the tracing onto the lino, throw away the tracing paper, then tracing paper is absolutely fine because it hasn't got time to distort. But if you are doing multi-block or Japanese woodblock, as we'll look at in a different series, then it's really essential to have completely stable tracing paper, because if that tracing paper changes shape or swells or shrinks or cockles, then it's really hard to line your blocks up. So when I swapped to using polyester tracing paper, I found that the registration, the lining up of my Japanese wood blocks was like magically better overnight, and that was nothing to do with my cutting or indeed my mapping out. It was all to do with having tracing paper that didn't change shape. Yeah, good. There are 2 weights of, Simon, thank you Simon for pointing that out. 2 weights of Holly Draw if you're going for it. So it's the 050 that I use. And it's you can get it in a tube. I buy it in the tube. I bought this pad because I had to take it to Japan and I couldn't get a tube in my suitcase, so I took a pad of it. It's probably cheaper on a roll, I don't know, but it's worth the money. Even though I hate the fact it's plastic, it's worth it. But you can. I kind of use it afterwards as well. If I want to mask something off, then I use old tracings to do that, because you've still got, I use it like plastic film after, as if I want to sort of mask off an area or something like that. It's quite handy to reuse it, because I'm too mean to throw it away. Right, okay, inks, Gary, inks. What inks are you looking at, Gary? Are you going to go with oil-based inks, safe wash inks? So, coloured inks, I think if I were going to choose a colour, I think having a good brown, a good dark brown is quite useful. Depends what your colour palette is, really. Yeah, oil-based. Yeah, they are expensive, aren't they? I always try not to buy them, and then I go into a shop and I do buy them. So I would say it very much depends on the sort of colours you like. You know, I'm kind of very earthy, crunchy sort of very natural palette. So brown is quite useful because it knocks colours back. But sorry, I'm being distracted by Ben, who's fiddling with the camera at the moment. I'm sure. But if you like bright colours, then you might want to invest in a purple or something like that you can use to blend with. But when I started, I had black, white and the primaries, and then the first thing I had was a brown, which I found great for sort of tipping the colours into sort of more natural colours. And I do have a purple. I barely ever use it. It seems to sort of transfer itself about onto other inks very successfully, but I don't use it very much. Right, okay, so brown ink. Would you go get burnt umber or raw umber and mix a bit of black with it? I would go for the darker one. Now, I'm a bit confused because Intaglio's burnt umber is like, it's quite a dark colour. They do a Van Dyke brown as well, which is like a transparency sort of brown. I personally would go with the darkest umber, which off the top of my head I can't remember. It's be burnt umber, wouldn't it? Because I like its kind of coolness. It's not it's not a gingery brown. Their Van Dyke brown is quite gingery, so I quite like that. And I find the burnt umber, if you mix burnt umber with blue, it makes a fantastic grey that you can tip into very easily into a lovely sort of bluey grey or a greeny grey, depending on how you get the mix right. So that's another reason, Gary, why I'd say a brown is good, because it will give you, it's good for mixing neutral greys if you like grey like me. Yes, Roseanne wants to know if I'm covering colour mixing. Yes, I am. So I've chosen two landscapes that are very different colours. There's the kind of my local landscape, which is just ridiculous. It's bright greens and it's all sappy and wet and kind of emerald green, and which are all those greens are really quite hard to manage. I think greens you have to be really careful with, or they can look awful. So I want to talk about mixing greens. And then the Scottish landscape, of course, is all those kind of greys and golds and reds and bronzes and things. So yeah, I want to look at kind of the subtle colours for getting a feeling of distance and the kind of rocky landscape. And I also want to look at how you do that kind of gorgeous, lush English home counties feel without it getting kind of nauseating and too much. Right. Ochre, yellow ochre. I have got yellow ochre and I do sometimes use it, but I would say, if it were me, I would use whatever yellow you've got and tip it over with brown. You see, I'm really pushing you towards brown, aren't I? Which is a kind of personal choice. But the yellow ochre, I do use it, but I wouldn't call it essential. I think brown before ochre, because brown's useful for tipping other colours over. Yeah, that's it. Claire, thank you. That sounds like a good video. I'm always very nervous because we've got slightly better organised, so we actually have like a little folder with a kind of schedule about what films we're going to make, and I say I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and then I think, how am I going to do that? So yeah, it's going to be exciting. But yeah, colour mixing. I think the thing about colour mixing that I find is that, because I'm always mixing one colour into the next colour into the next one, I've got a load on the glass at the moment, everything gets subdued a little bit, and I quite like that. I like colour mixes to be really complicated. It's a bit like we finally got around to painting our stairs during lockdown, and we went to buy the paint. And the paint that we bought for the stairs was like hideously expensive compared to ordinary house paint. And the reason it's expensive is because it's made up of many, many different pigments. So it's actually, it's grey in some light, it's green in others, it's amazing. But the point is, it's got lots and lots of different colours in it. And the guy who was we were talking about this, and he said, well, yeah, it's really expensive because it's very complicated, and like the cheaper the paint for painting your house with, the less colour mixing goes into it, and the kind of more crude the colour mix is, and so you don't get that kind of subtlety. And so I think with what I'd say about mixing colour is it's sort of easy to, if you mix all your colours separately, they can kind of almost fight each other, whereas if you're constantly mixing a bit of this in with a bit of that, it makes it quite harmonious. Right, yeah, Claire, buy brown, you won't regret it. If I have a Odette wants to know, if I have a 3-colour mix, how do you record it so you can mix the same again? So when I first started doing this, I did keep a little book of colour mixes, and I would jot down what I was mixing. And I did that for a while, and then I started teaching, and I started having to mix colours for other people. And the more confident I got, the better I got at just matching a colour. So I'm pretty good now, because I sometimes have, like with Japanese woodblock, where I'll have a whole an edition, and I've printed, say, 10 prints, and it's gone away for 6 months or whatever, and then I need to print some more. Then I'm pretty good at looking at the colours and matching them. But I don't keep a specific book anymore, really. I might jot down colour mixes maybe more for Japanese woodblock, seldom with Lino, because each print is a reduction, so it's kind of, I'm doing the whole edition in one go. But it's a good idea to do that if you want a precise measurement. I did a residency in Japan with a guy who was really precise about it.
Experience.
Yeah, experience, yeah, practice, loads of practice. I mean, it's quite a good game to sort of maybe try mixing a few colours to match, you know, pick a few book covers or something and try and mix a colour to match up. It's a good way of learning how to mix. Yeah, Gary wants to know, have I worked longer than a full week on any pieces? Oh, yeah. It depends how complicated they are and how much life intervenes, because unfortunately I probably spend about 30% of my time actually printing compared to the joy of running a business. So if I were on my own just printing a print, I would say it probably, if it were a big complicated thing, might 10 days, something like that, possibly. Just depends, really. Sometimes I do prints and then I lose heart and I go away and then I come back. So there might be a pause. Like I've got one at the moment that I've drawn out, which is like a Buckinghamshire scene. And I want to do that on very lightweight Japanese paper, and I kind of have it in my head, but I haven't got round to it. So that's sort of stalled at the moment. Yes, Claire is talking about a Pantone formula chart. We had a chat about those last week. A Pantone chart is a really good idea. If there's anybody there who didn't see last week's, this is a Pantone chart, and it has colour recipes. So it gives you the colour, but at the bottom it's got the mixes that go into making up that colour. They're dead expensive, but they are worth it if you want a whole load of mixing recipes. So that's quite useful. Right, okay, so Rona is saying she's using Cobalt Dryer with Caligo Safe Wash. After a few layers now, it's remaining tacky. Ooh, are you letting, so you're printing wet on wet, is that, so are you letting each layer dry before you put the next layer on? And also, where your prints are drying, is the air moving? Is it have you got a window open or something to move the air around? Because that can really help with drying. I learnt that when I visited Cranfield Ink's factory. They said that the biggest thing that you can do to improve drying is just to have a fan under the print so the air's moving about. But Cobalt is, it's usually quite effective, but Cobalt dries the surface of the ink. Manganese dries throughout the ink, whereas Cobalt is drying the surface layer of the ink. So if you are like, it's not completely dry and you're printing layer on top of layer, you've got ink that the surface is dry of, but it's not dry all the way through. And so the more you put on, it will get slightly tackier. Yeah, it will dry. Some of the blues take forever to dry. Also, it depends on how thick you ink as well. I mean, I am sort of queen of the wafer thin layers of ink. I always under ink rather than over ink. But if you like a nice big flat, right, okay. Warm room, it should be all right.
It needs air movement.
Yeah, it needs air movement. No, Ben is the technical chap, and he says it needs air movement. If it's possible to crack a window open or something that will just get the air moving.
Or even just a fan.
Yeah, or a fan or something. Yeah. That will help. I didn't know that, and actually since I learnt that, it's improved things. But with your inking, do you like a sort of nice chunky layer of ink? Because that can make a, yeah. Printing onto tacky. Yeah, it's tricky. it will dry, but I would look at getting the ink layers as thin as you can. And the Cobalt Dryer, are you using it at about 4%, something like that? Right, the wax dryer, yeah, I started using Cobalt Dryer and then okay, right, so I need something to make a mess on. So kids, don't do this at home because I'm going to do this, get this out and use my fingers. So this is Cobalt Dryer, which as you can see is a liquid, sort of purple liquid. And this is, the cobalt is in spirits here. And then the wax dryer, this is manganese, which is the dryer that dries the whole of the body of the ink, not just the surface. And this is like waxy, as its name suggests. So this is like in Vaseline. So that's in spirits and that's in Vaseline. The problem with this in spirits is, of course, the spirits don't help the ink to dry. So there's like a fine balance between the benefit of the cobalt and the adverse effects of the spirit in the ink. So if you go above about 4%, it doesn't really help. Whereas this stuff, which is my greatest love, because I've just discovered it, the Printmaker's Wax Dryer is the manganese, and that's lovely. But it does work quite fast. So if you put manganese in with your inks at about 4%, if you put this wax dryer in, you can't then leave it overnight. I think one of the Lino with Laura films showed that, didn't it? Where the ink with dryer in it, it goes all stringy.
Oh, it's horrible.
You can't leave your ink and reuse it. Manganese also comes in a liquid, which shows you how disgusting things are in my studio. I'm a bit ashamed of that. So, okay, so that's manganese in spirit there. And they come in, they don't come in dropper bottles, you have to dispense them into your own dropper bottles.
Apparently hand printed and Jacksons are out of wax dryers. I think that might have something to do with you.
Oh dear, sorry about that. Cranfield make it, and I'm just trying to, have Intaglio got it? Have you tried Intaglio? Intaglio might have it, but I don't know. But Shirley should definitely pay me commission if I'm responsible for that, but I don't suppose I am. I think it's just coincidence. But you could also talk to Cranfield. They are incredibly friendly if you can get hold of them. Cranfield Colours have a wonderful website, but they also have, like, they're always really friendly, so you can ring them up and say, look, I can't get it for love nor money, can you tell me where to go? So try them. I know that the factory's open at the moment. They're socially distanced, but they are open. Yeah, the studio looks fine. Well, the studio is okay. It's the kind of bottles of strange substances. It's like I have my white spirit in a water bottle, which is like safety first is not high priority. That was the kind of thing that we were all taught as children, that you never put chemicals in water bottles, but I have. Yes, thank you. Yeah, the Cranfield, they're where to buy. So they do have stockist lists on their website. But if you're desperate, I just ring them up. They always. I went to interview them, and I did an interview for the podcast that I do, which is called Ask an Artist. Really, really worth listening to that interview with Michael Crane, who's the managing director there. And the impression I got is that they're just desperate to chat to printmakers. So don't hesitate to ring them up. Right, so they're only suggesting Jacksons and hand printed. Right. I don't know why it's so elusive, because it's bloody lovely stuff. I don't know why they don't have lots of it out there. But I'm just trying to think if there's anybody else who'd do it, but I can't think of it.
We're going to start having to tell Jacksons and Handprinted and all these other suppliers before we do an episode
this week
on
we're going
anything.
to talk about
like Delia Smith and eggs.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think that Shirley should. I've got to talk to Shirley anyway, so I'll ask her about that. But they should be able to get some out of the factory, I think, because they haven't shut it down completely. So Linda's bought liquid dryer from Hawthorne's. Does it say what sort it is? Is it cobalt or manganese? Maybe it's something else. If it smells of biscuits, it's manganese, because that smells a kind of slightly malty, biscuity smell. But there's nothing wrong with liquid dryers if you're careful with them. Don't put too much of it in.
Really? Multi-biscuits?
Multi-biscuit. It does smell of biscuit. I think it smells of biscuit. Does it smell of biscuits? Not very much now. You won't be able to smell it. Ben hasn't got a great sense of smell.
I'm not getting that at all.
He's not getting. You see, I'm getting the whole cup of Horlicks and a biscuit vibe from that dryer. Though I don't suggest that you go around sniffing dryers. That's probably a really bad idea. But yeah, if it does smell of biscuits, it's manganese, and that's the one that will dry throughout. The other thing about Cobalt Dryer is it will make your prints shiny, which, you know, is not necessarily a bad thing, but it will make the surface a bit shiny with it. Right, okay, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. So Ben is tapping. Are we at 9 o'clock? We're
well past 9.
We're well past 9 o'clock. If anyone's got any, yes, he's good at pronouncing names, so he has got some talent, I would say. So I think we're running out of time, but if anyone's got a last question or two, I am happy to answer. I'm going to be doing these films all week, and I might live stream next Friday. We're kind of hoping that we can set up better cameras, because once we've got better cameras, I can show you more stuff on live stream. At the moment, it's really difficult to show anything close up, but I was thinking it might be good to have some prints to talk about on live stream, so I can kind of talk through the ways I've done them, if that would be helpful. So yes, Andrea wants to know, if you add wax dryer to Caligo Safe Wash, can you wash it with soap and water? I believe so. I don't think you'd be adding it. You'd only be adding like maybe 4% at the most of the dryer. So I don't think that would be a problem at all. If you want to stay away from white spirit, I would think it would be okay. I don't think it'll be, yeah. Claire is asking, with the Pantone colour guides, are you using the Pantone charts, the CMYK colour? They're based on the Pantone colours. They are based on Pantone colours, and they won't give you a precise recipe, but they'll give you enough of a flavour for what colours are going in there as a sort of kick-off point. For example, there's a really lovely green that you can make with yellow and black and a tiny bit of red, and I wouldn't have known that, you know, just sort of, it's a bit counterintuitive that you would use black to make green, but once I knew that, then I could make my own range of greens, and I got that from Pantone. So it's kind of enough information to give you a fair guidance. I mean, if you were trying to absolutely match a Pantone colour, then yeah, you'd have to use the right inks for that. Good, I'm glad there are light bulbs going off. Well, good. I'm glad you've enjoyed it. I hope everyone does enjoy the live stream. I sort of try and make it as helpful as possible. And as I say, when we've got the lighting and the camera fixed a bit better, then I can be a bit more constructive about some of the things that I'm showing. But good. Good. So thank you everybody for coming, and good night. Sleep well if you're in the UK, and enjoy your day if you are elsewhere in different time zones. Yeah, bye.